More with Lars right now on FM News 101.
You are now about to witness the knowledge of right talk.
This is the Lars Larson Show.
Straight out of Vancouver, crazy dude named Larson. From the gang called Rednecks with Attitudes. When he's called off, he's got a sawed off. Call a show and liberals are hauled off. You too, boy, if you argue with me. Lars Larson on KXL.
Welcome back to the Lars Larson Show. Glad to get your calls at 866-439-5277. I would love to see a strong conservative Republican replace Dr. Kurt Schrader. And he is Ben Pollock running for Congress. Ben, good to have you on the program.
Hey, Lars. Good to be here.
Listen, why do you want to run against Schrader, and what would you bring to the table for conservatives in Oregon who've seen far too few conservatives representing them in Congress?
Yeah, well, I mean, one thing is I've worked in campaigns, winning campaigns. I know how to win. I know how to manage a campaign. But specifically, you know, we always hear politicians in Washington talking about the debt and how it's going to affect, you know, their children and their children's children. Well, as I'm sure you've read today, I'm a pretty young guy. They're talking about people like me. You know, I'm the one that's going to have to deal with tens of trillions of dollars in unfunded liabilities that we're racking up and the effects of this bad economy and Obamacare. And it's time that we have people, you know, of a new generation step up with their ideas and start leading.
All right, tell me this. Would you vote to repeal Obamacare, or are you the more moderate Republican who'd say, let's fix it?
Let's repeal it. I'm on Obamacare. I'm going to be if I ever, if they get it together. And it's a mess, but we have to replace it with something that achieves the goals of expanding coverage, reducing costs. We can't just repeal it and not replace it with something.
I think there are plenty of, and I imagine there are some other plans you might put forward, and I know Republicans have been suggesting alternatives since Obamacare was first proposed.
Correct. Absolutely.
Do you plan to take one of those? Do you have a plan that you could sketch out for people when you go out to give speeches running against Schrader? Are you going to say, and here's what we can replace it with, so that people have something tangible they can grasp onto and say, oh, there's the conservative alternative?
Absolutely. We are going to have to do that. We are working on developing a plan. You know, I'm actually kind of a policy wonk. I'm not a guy that talks in talking points. So, you know, my whole campaign is built on giving real conservative solutions to the people, and absolutely we are going to have a actual plan to present to people as an alternative to Obamacare.
I'm talking to Ben Pollock, a fourth-generation Oregonian who's going to run against Kurt Schrader, who is one of the Democrat congressmen from Oregon. So let's go through some of the various issues, but before we do that, tell people a bit about your background so they know where you're coming from.
Yeah, sure. You know, like you said, I'm a fourth-generation Oregonian. I help run my family's 37-year-old small business here in the district, here in Canby. Born and raised in Portland. I spent a couple years in Washington, D.C. I went to graduate school. I worked on the Hill there for a year for Steve King from Iowa, who's a great conservative.
Oh, he's a great guy. Good friend of the show for 10 years.
He's a great guy. I loved working for him. That was a great experience. I went and I worked on some state-level campaigns in Texas, really learned campaign techniques down there in Texas that we're not even doing here yet. And I hope to bring some of that knowledge that I've learned up here. I worked in digital strategy for a while, worked with Ted Cruz, Rick Perry, Newt Gingrich. So I've got a pretty decent conservative background, I would say.
All right, so let's test you on a couple of issues, because I want you to roll some of these things out. Amnesty for illegal aliens is likely to come up right after we're done with this debacle. In fact, we probably won't be done with it. It'll probably continue to sink like a big cruise liner going down for a long time before it's repealed. So where do you sit on amnesty for illegal aliens? And let's be specific. You know the issues that we're all in favor of legal immigration. We are against illegals coming here. So what do you do with the 12 million people who are currently illegally in our country?
Absolutely. That's a great question. And I don't think it is feasible to deport 12 million people. However, we can do things to, discourage them from being here. We can We can.
Do you like Steve King's idea? The I think it's called the Clear Act.
Yeah, he proposes the Clear Act every Congress, and I think that's what it's called. Yeah, or the and one of the things I support is E-Verify for employers. I think we need to be doing that.
I agree. But right now, if you E-Verify, you only E-Verify new applicants. If we told every company in America, as King has proposed, you need to verify that all of your workers are here legally. If they're not here legally when you file your taxes, you will not be able to count the wages you paid to them as a deductible expense of your business. That would make it expensive to employ illegal aliens, and they would and if you allowed the employer the latitude to fire somebody for not being a legal worker, which they lack right now, a lot of people might self-deport. Are you in favor of that?
Well, I just don't, as someone who helps, who runs a family business, I don't understand. It doesn't even make sense to me how you can't fire someone for being an illegal immigrant. I just don't even understand that.
All right, let's talk forestry then. I think we've got you on that issue. What do you do to fix the problem that Oregon has a tremendous number of federal forests and they're effectively not allowed to log any of it right now?
Yeah, it's ridiculous, and I think Washington gives in to the environmental scene too much. They have this notion that somehow when we talk about forestry, somehow we're talking about old style clear cutting of old growth forest, and that's simply not the case. That's not what goes on anymore. So we have to be very clear that we can log in forests at the same time be environmentally responsible about that, and we absolutely must open up these federal timberlands. I mean, the federal government owns so much of our timberland, and they're killing the rural economy. We absolutely have to work together, with the entire Oregon and West Coast delegations to get that moving.
Okay, but Ben, I always hear these generalities, and I want to fault you on this because I've heard other folks who are running for Congress right now who say, we're going to work to get the Forest Service to allow more logging. That hasn't worked for 30 years, and there is no indication that it ever will, going all the way back to the Clinton Forest Plan a couple of decades ago. So do we need to take those forests and hand off ownership to the counties, to the states, to private individuals? What will get this going is not just talking to the Forest Service. It's it's a crew of lifer environmentalists who believe that not cutting trees down is the best solution. So Are you ready to go to bat for something like that, or just say, well, we're going to work on the Forest Service to see if we can get them to let more cutting happen?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I mean, an approach such as what you just outlined hasn't worked. And you look at the numbers. The federal government owns ridiculous amounts of land here. That should be in our control. That needs to be owned, by the state, by the counties, by citizens of Oregon. That doesn't need to be owned by the federal government.
All right. What are the other issues you plan to take on Schrader with and beat him and then replace him in Congress?
Yeah, okay. So, I mean, obviously we've talked a little about health care. I have a personal experience with Obamacare. I was one of the millions of Americans that's getting those letters saying, oh, hey, by the way, you can't keep your plan. Your plan no longer exists. And so now we're without, we have to rely on Cover Oregon, which, that's a complete joke. And people's premiums are going up. Millions of working families now have to pay hundreds of dollars a month in health insurance costs that they didn't have to pay before, even after subsidies. And with the weak economy right now, this is the absolutely wrong time to be doing anything like that. And Schrader's been a big advocate of Obamacare. He also, he's also voted to raise taxes on working families when they can't afford it, when their wages are stagnant, when we're having a tough time just getting by. And he also, he's big on this food stamp thing. And one of the things I think is so funny about that is he gets up on the House floor and he rails against the food stamp cuts. But then when it comes time to actually vote for the farm bill, he votes for it, And then, of course, afterwards he then voted against it. And you can't figure out where he stands on anything. And on my website, you can see where I stand on all the major issues. You go to Kurt Schrader's website, he doesn't even have an issues page. It doesn't exist. So you can't tell where he stands on anything.
Ben, before we run out of time, tell me this. What are you going to do with the fact that you don't have the name familiarity that he has, and he has incumbency working for him too? How are you going to beat that?
Yeah, he's got, he definitely has the incumbency factor, and he's got a well-known name around here. And he has this persona as a moderate, almost tries to pretend like he's a Republican. And sure, yeah, it's going to be a challenge, but it's a challenge we're up for, I plan to bring a campaign structure that's much more disciplined than what we've seen recently. We're going to utilize data, micro-targeting. We're going to be knocking on doors 5, 6, 7 days a week. And I think in terms of fundraising, we're going to be just fine. We already had, $12,000 before we started. The donations have been coming in today. We've got a great digital team that's allowing us to harness the grassroots and bring those small grassroots donations in. And I think people are tired of professional politicians. Kurt Schrader's got great name recognition, but he's been around a long time, and people are tired of the same old politicians who can't get anything done, and they're ready for a change.
On that note, Ben, would you make a commitment to limit the time you spend in Congress? Because it seems like everybody gets back there, drinks the water, and decides, I'm God's gift to politics, and I'm going to stay as long as I can.
Lars, I'm so glad you asked that question, because in my announcement and on my website, I make just that pledge. I've pledged publicly, right there on my website, to serve no more than 2 terms. I believe strongly in the role of citizen legislators. I work for my family's small business. I'm going to go to Washington, serve no more than 2 terms, come back home, live under the laws that I passed, and be a regular citizen. And I think that's what everyone in Congress should be doing. I think
that's a powerful point to make to audiences. Ben, where's the website?
It is benforcongress.com.
It's a pleasure to have you on. We'll have you back.
Thank you so much, Lars.
Thank you very much. And by the way, Kurt Schrader is invited to come on the radio as well, but he's not as crazy about accepting our invitations, even though we would treat him politely and civilly. Back in just a moment. Your calls at 866-439-5277. Email talk@larslarson.com. Portland's best traffic right here from Jeremy Scott on FM News 101.